The photo loaded slowly, one gray bar climbing into color. A hospital blanket, two small faces, pink and furious, the way newborns are. My husband's hand, the one with the crooked pinky knuckle, cupped under a swaddled head, like he'd done it 100 times. Daddy loves you both. I was standing at my kitchen island with a dish towel over one shoulder. My sister's name sat at the top of the screen. Emily, sent to me by mistake. I understood that the way you understand a spill before you've looked down to see what broke. I set the towel on the counter and let the rice behind me start catching on the bottom of the pot. Then I turned off the burner. My name is Nicole Young. I'm 38. I'm a forensic accountant. 14 years finding the one number in a ledger that doesn't want to be found. I don't flinch at what the numbers say. I had never once turned that instinct on my own marriage. Charles and I had been married 8 years. Children were never the complicated part. Wanting them was easy. What came after wasn't. 2 years trying on our own, then appointments, injections that left small bruised constellations I covered with looser shirts. 3 pregnancies, none past the first trimester. I carried most of that grief alone because Charles always found his footing faster than I did. At night, I ran numbers that weren't really numbers. What did I do wrong? Charles held my hand in every waiting room and said the same 6 words so often they stopped sounding like comfort and started sounding like a spell. We'll get through this together. I believed him the way you believe gravity. My sister Emily was around for most of it, 3 years younger, warm in a way that never announced itself. She used to say she admired how I handled everything. It never occurred to me that admiration and envy wear the same voice. The call came 90 seconds after the photo. I picked up. Didn't say hello. Nicole? Already cracking? I didn't mean for you to see it like this. Like this? Not, I didn't mean for this to happen. I hung up without answering. 14 years of finding other people's hidden numbers had taught me one rule I've never broken. You don't confront a person the moment you find the first irregularity. You gather everything first. You let them believe you know nothing. I opened my laptop instead of my mouth. Found a family law attorney with the best reviews in the city, a man named Daniel Brooks. 2 days later, I sat across from him in an office that smelled like fresh coffee, and I signed the paperwork to end my marriage. My hand didn't shake. I remember noticing that, almost with surprise. I didn't tell Charles I knew. I made dinner that night as though nothing had shifted, because for the first time in years, I understood something clearly. I wasn't the one who needed to explain myself. The next morning, I woke before sunrise and made coffee for one. Charles had texted the night before, breezy about a work trip. I read it twice and got to work. People who are confident they'll never get caught, stop being careful. We kept mostly separate accounts, except a joint one for house expenses. Buried in months of grocery runs, I found 4 charges to the same hotel in a suburb neither of us had reason to visit. 2 nights each stay, always Thursday into Friday. 3 of the 4 lined up with weeks I'd been recovering from a procedure. Weeks he'd said he needed to stay late at the office. Emily had mentioned more than once that she was simply driving Charles to appointments I couldn't get to. I'm just helping out. I found records showing several of those days had no appointments scheduled at all. A shared cloud folder neither of us had closed held photos going back 3 years. Emily standing too close at his office holiday party, a beach in the background of a business trip, nowhere near any client site. They hadn't been careless. They'd simply never imagined I would look. There's a particular pain in confirming a betrayal you already have suspected, different from the shock of one you never saw coming. This was the first kind. Underneath it, something colder settled into place. For 8 years, I had absorbed every hard moment as my own failure. Now I understood I'd been carrying weight that was never mine. I built a file, every charge, every mismatched alibi, every time-stamped photo, organized the way I'd organize evidence for a client. No commentary. The facts didn't need my anger attached. Daniel read through it during our second meeting. "This is thorough," he said. 14 years of practice, I told him. He didn't ask what I meant. 3 days later, my phone rang with a number I hadn't expected. Margaret, Charles's mother. We'd always been close. She used to call just to talk about her garden. This call was different from the first breath she took. Nicole? Then nothing. Just breathing. Please, she said finally. Don't tell him yet. Don't tell him what, Margaret? She didn't answer. She just said it again, like it was the only sentence holding her upright. We met 2 days later at a coffee shop we'd been to a dozen times. She was already seated, hands wrapped around her cup so tightly her knuckles had gone white. What I'm about to tell you, she said, before I'd taken off my coat, I should have said 8 years ago. I said nothing. Silence is the fastest way to keep someone talking. Does Emily know? It was the question sitting heaviest on my chest. No, neither does Charles. Only me and Dr. Collins. Your old doctor. My stomach went tight. There was a report, results, addressed to Charles. It came to the house by mistake. I opened it without thinking. A pause. It wasn't routine. I understood it would break something in him I didn't think could be put back together. So I called Dr. Collins and asked her to let me handle it in my own time. Margaret looked down. I never handled it. I delayed it, and it grew into something much bigger. She pulled a small, worn slip of paper from her purse. Not the report. A note she'd written herself. She didn't hand it over. I can't tell you here. You deserve to see it properly. I was protecting myself from watching him fall apart. I need to see that file. The real one. She nodded, wiping her eyes. Those babies changed everything, Nicole. But not for the reason Charles thinks. I called Dr. Collins before I'd finished my coffee. I need my old file, I said. Every result from the year we were in treatment. A pause. The hum of the clinic behind it. Can I ask what's brought this on? Margaret came to see me. Come in this afternoon? She met me in her office, a thick folder already waiting. Before I show you this, I've regretted my part in it for years. Margaret came to me in real distress, and I let a mother's fear override a patient's right to her own results. I'm sorry, Nicole. Truly. Inside, hormone panels, ultrasound notes, the familiar shorthand of 8 years. Near the back, a report I'd never seen, dated 8 years earlier, addressed to Charles. Never to me. The results weren't about me. A male factor finding? Significant enough that Dr. Collins had recommended in writing that we discuss alternative paths together. The letter had gone home addressed to him. Margaret had opened it by mistake and decided alone to protect him from a truth she believed he couldn't survive. 8 years of self-blame rearranged themselves into something else entirely. Every apology I'd whispered in the dark. None of it had ever belonged to me. Why didn't she tell him? Fear, Dr. Collins said gently. Protecting him mattered more than the truth. I don't think she ever imagined what it would cost the rest of you. I thought of Emily, of a caption that said Daddy without hesitation. If the report was accurate, those children weren't biologically his, which meant Emily either didn't know the truth herself or knew something far more complicated than an affair. I sat in my car in the driveway a long time before I called Margaret that evening. I have the file, I told her. I know what it says. She was quiet a long moment, relief threading through the exhaustion. Now I understand, I said, why your face went white the moment you saw those babies. I didn't hear from Charles for almost 2 weeks. It was Margaret who called on a Thursday, her voice tight. Charles is coming home tonight. He wants me to meet the babies properly. He's bringing Emily. You don't have to do anything you're not ready for. I've hidden this for 8 years, she said. I think it's time I stopped. I wasn't in the room, but Margaret told me enough afterward that I could see it. Charles arrived first, easy and certain. Emily followed with a carrier in each hand, her face somewhere between apology and pride. Mom, Charles said, gesturing toward the twins. You're finally a grandmother. The room went very quiet, Margaret said. She looked at those 2 small faces and something inside her gave out. All the years of telling herself she was protecting him, collapsing at once. She had to reach for the back of a chair. Mom, what's wrong? The words that came out weren't the ones she'd rehearsed. Wait, she whispered. He didn't tell you? Charles went still. Emily went pale in a way that told Margaret something important. Whatever was coming was news to both of them, for entirely different reasons. Margaret walked into the study and knelt in front of a fireproof safe she'd kept for exactly this moment. Inside was a single sealed envelope, soft at the edges from years of being touched and put back. She carried it to the coffee table and laid it out. The lab results, Dr. Collins's letter, her own handwritten note. Charles read slowly, then faster. This says, he stopped. This is about me. Yes, this isn't Nicole's file. It's mine. You're telling me the reason we couldn't have kids was never her. His voice had gone flat. 8 years, I let her think it was her fault. She apologized to me, Mom. I let her, because I never knew there was anything to say otherwise. Emily had gone very still. Margaret watched the pieces arrange themselves across her face. The same condition that made conception nearly impossible with me would have made it just as unlikely with her. The children in her arms might not carry his blood at all. Charles, what does this mean? He didn't answer her. You knew, he said to his mother. You've known for 8 years and let me believe. He stood, started pacing, like he needed his body to move, because his mind had stopped being able to hold still. I was trying to protect you. Protect me from the truth? You let me watch my wife blame herself for 8 years. Something passed between Charles and Emily then that had nothing to do with love. The cold understanding that whatever they'd built rested on the same broken foundation as the marriage he'd just walked out of. His face went through something Margaret could only call a collapse. Internal, like a building coming down, while the outer wall stayed standing. I need to see Nicole. He was already moving, keys off the table. Front door open before anyone could stop him. He showed up a little after 9. I watched his headlights sweep the wall before I heard the car door, and I knew, with a strange calm, exactly what the visit was about. He looked undone. Collar askew, eyes red-rimmed, the report creased in his fist. You knew, he said before the door was fully open. I found out 2 weeks ago, the same way I found out about Emily, by accident. He flinched. I swear to you, I had no idea about any of this. I know, and I meant it. Standing there looking at the wreckage of a man who just learned the guilt he'd let me carry for 8 years had never belonged to me. I felt something closer to sorrow than anger. Can I come in? I just need to talk. I let him in because I wanted this on my own terms, ending whenever I chose. He told me everything. The safe, Emily going pale, 10 minutes flattening 3 years. I'm not asking you to forgive Emily or the affair, but if my mother had told me the truth 8 years ago, none of this happens. This started with a lie that wasn't mine. I let him finish. People reveal more when you let them talk themselves to the end. You're right. The lie wasn't yours. A pause. But you're wrong about one thing. This didn't start with your mother's secret. It started the day you decided whatever you were missing at home, you were entitled to go find somewhere else, without ever once telling me you were struggling. I didn't know how to say it. You were already carrying so much. So you let me carry more. You let me believe I was the reason we couldn't have a family for 8 years while you built one with someone else. The report doesn't undo that. He didn't have an answer. I watched the fight leave him. The way it does when an argument built the whole drive over doesn't survive being said out loud. What happens now? The divorce moves forward. Nothing about tonight changes that. And Emily? That's not my concern anymore. Saying it out loud, I found it was true. He left a little before midnight. I watched his taillights shrink down the street, and something settled in my chest instead of tightening. The ending of my marriage had never really been about a photograph or a file buried in a safe. It had been about the moment I stopped waiting for someone else to hand me the truth and went and found it myself. The final mediation came 3 weeks later. I dressed the way I'd dress for any important meeting. Simple, composed. I wasn't performing strength anymore. By then I simply had it. The settlement terms were fair, if not generous, toward Charles, given what the paper trail had shown. I asked for nothing more than what I was entitled to. The truth had already done more than any number could. I'd heard secondhand that Emily had already moved out of state with the twins. He hadn't fought to stop her. Before the proceedings began, he tried once more. Nicole, I know I don't deserve it, but is there any version of this where we try again? I looked at him a long moment and felt something I hadn't expected. Not anger, not even sadness. A quiet finality. The way you feel finishing the last page of a book you already knew the ending to. There isn't. Not because I can't forgive you. I think in time I probably will, but forgiveness was never going to be the same thing as staying. He didn't argue. Something in his shoulders loosened, like part of him had been waiting to hear exactly that. Margaret called that evening. She didn't ask for forgiveness outright. She understood that isn't something you can request and receive on the same day. She said she was proud of how I'd handled everything, and that she hoped someday we might still find a way to know each other. I told her I'd like that. I didn't rebuild my life around what I'd lost. I built it around what I'd learned. A year later, I used part of the settlement to start a small foundation, one that helps couples navigate infertility with real transparency, full access to their own medical information, support that doesn't leave anyone carrying blame that was never theirs. I didn't name it after myself. It just needed to exist. I think about those 8 years now without bitterness, with something closer to gratitude for the woman they made me. I spent so long believing I had failed at the one thing I wanted most. I know now I never failed at anything. I simply trusted people who hadn't earned it yet. I won't waste another day carrying what was never mine,